Hey, welcome back, podcast friends, to another episode of Simple Healthy Choices for Weight Loss. And today's episode is going to be three of kind of a four-part series. And the whole purpose of this four-part series is I really want everybody to understand that we have been lied to about what actually causes obesity and type 2 diabetes and hypertension and Alzheimer's and PCOS and skin conditions and everything else. The underlying fact that causes all these diseases is basically one thing: the overindulgence of carbohydrates, mainly like sugar and flour, but all carbohydrates, which are plant-based materials, which get turned into triglycerides. And we're going to talk about that today. But the whole purpose of what I'm trying to tell you is we've been lied to saying that fat and cholesterol is what causes cardiovascular disease. And that's what's causing obesity and all these things. And that is not true. That is a lie. It's been proven over and over and over. But since this has been going for 40, 50 years, then it's so hard. The dogma that everybody has in their mind because of what the food companies and drug companies are trying to tell everybody. Everybody thinks that eating fat and eating cholesterol is what's causing all of our diseases, and that is not true. Fat and cholesterol are extremely vital to our existence, and that's what I've tried explaining in last episode and this episode. So last episode, the first episode, twice ago, 2 episodes ago, we talked about how does our body actually transfer all the cholesterol and fat around to our body to all the places that it's needed. And this is when we talked about the things that you see on your cholesterol panel, which are your VLDLs, LDLs, HDLs, triglyceride, total cholesterol. Okay. So I explained what those things are. And those are just little submarines. Those are actual particles. So when they say HDL or LDL or VLDL, that is not cholesterol. Cholesterol is a molecule. Fatty acids are molecules. The LDLs, these are particles. It's a combination of proteins and fat and cholesterol. And that's how our body moves it all around our body, okay, to the place that's needed. Then last episode, we talked about, we're going to break it down, okay? We talked about fat and cholesterol. So last week we talked about cholesterol, why that is vital to our existence. We have to have it. Our body makes almost all the cholesterol that we need. That's how important it is. And what we eat of cholesterol, very little, if any, actually gets absorbed into our body. So dietary cholesterol is not a problem. Same thing with dietary fats. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, okay, we talked about cholesterol. Today is going to be about fatty acids. What are fatty acids? Fatty acids, okay, just like we said last time, cholesterol is a big, very complex molecule. It is made up of carbon and hydrogens, but within this long chain of carbons, there are 4 different rings also. If you remember your rings in chemistry, if you've had chemistry, but there are 3 6-membered rings and 1 5-membered ring. And all those rings are called a sterol ring. And it's called sterol because that's what cholesterol is. And this is where we make things like our hormones, like our steroid hormones. So cholesterol is extremely vital. Fatty acids are not as complex. These are just a straight chain of carbons and hydrogens. That's all fatty acids are. But these are very, very, very important because fatty acids are the energy source that our body loves the most. Our body can use either glucose or fatty acids for its energy source, and fatty acids get broken down into ketones. But of the two, fat by far is our preferred source of energy, and that's obvious from our body. And things that we'll talk about here as far as the difference in the amount of energy that you get from fat versus glucose, the differences in where our body stores, how much storage we have for fat versus glucose, how much cleaner it burns. Fat cleans much cleaner than glucose does. Glucose makes free radicals, these oxygens these ROS, reactive oxygen species, when you burn glucose to make your ATP, to make your energy. So all these extra little reactive oxygen species, these free radicals are floating around our body, which is why everybody's saying that you need to start taking antioxidants like vitamin C. The reason we have to have so many antioxidants is because we've changed from using fat for our energy source. We've changed over to using glucose for energy source because that's what we've been told from food companies, drug companies, the American Diabetic Association, USDA, the NIH. I mean, all these companies who are making lots and lots of money off everybody being eating this horrible man-made food and getting sick. So you're taking all these medications, and these food companies and these drug companies are paying big dollars to all these organizations that have something to do with telling you what you should be eating. Since they make a lot of money, in fact, they are making a killing off of this kind of food and these kind of drugs. And I mean that literally. People are dying all the time because of the horrible diseases that all these carbohydrates that we're eating. All the carbohydrates that we eat are causing the diseases that we have, and we'll explain that. And then the money that they're making off of it is the reason why we probably will never see a change unless we do it from the grassroots. And that's why I'm talking to everybody. I really want everybody to understand why our diseases are getting worse and worse every year, why our obesity is getting worse and worse in every year, why type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's and hypertension and cardiovascular disease, all these things are skyrocketing ever since our food companies started telling everybody that carbohydrates should be the basis of our food pyramid. That's what we should be eating, and keep away from animal fat and animal meat. When they started telling everybody these lies, everybody started getting sick, but they started making a lot of money, so they continue to tell these. So that's why I'm doing this series. So I'll get right into it. Fatty acids. What are fatty acids? Again, fatty acids, okay, fat. This is the source of fat that our body uses for energy. This is the main source of energy that we use. The way fatty acids get circulated into our body is our liver takes these fatty acids and it combines it into these LDLs. First, it turns it into a triglyceride. And what a triglyceride is picture a big capital E. So you've got the vertical glycerol backbone, and then you have the 3 horizontal lines, and those are your 3 fatty acids. So since you have 3 fatty acids and 1 glycerol backbone to make that capital E, that's why it's called a triglyceride, okay? 3 fatty acids and a glycerol molecule. And this is the way that our body transports all this extremely vital fatty acids all around to our body for all the things that our body uses fatty acids for. And it's also the storage form. So when our body takes these fatty acids and puts them into our fat cells convert those back into triglycerides, and it stores it until our body needs it. So I keep saying until our body needs it. What does our body use fatty acids for? It uses it for so many things. Fat and cholesterol are vital to our existence. One thing we've already talked about, fatty acids are used for our energy. Okay. And again, glucose is. But fat, when you use fatty acids for the same amount, so if you have glucose, okay, carbohydrates that weigh 1 gram, and you have fat that weighs 1 gram. And if you're going to turn both of those into energy, when you use 1 gram of carbohydrates to make energy, you only get 4 kilocalories of energy. But when you use 1 gram of fat, you get 9 calories of energy. Now, you may not think that's that big a deal. It's over twice the amount of energy for the same carbon molecule. This is huge because we have fat stores all over our body. If we use glucose for our normal energy source, we would have to have over twice the amount of glucose that we have of fat, which means our bodies would be almost twice as heavy. So glucose was never supposed to be used as our main energy source. Glucose is supposed to be used for a fight or flight energy, and that's really it. All our other energy should be used from fatty acids. And this is what I'm trying to prove to you. 1, fat has more, you make more energy per calorie. So 9 calories per gram of fat and only 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. The other thing that fatty acids are used for is, like we said, are these triglycerides. This is how we move fat around the body in these VLDLs and LDLs. And that's also how we store all our energy in all of our subcutaneous fat cells. Okay. So energy storage is a huge part of what fat is here for and why we have all these subcutaneous fat cells. The other thing is, because we store the fat around in our subcutaneous fat cells, that also helps insulate our body. So the more fat you have, the more insulated you are, as far as, and this is why, the more fat that you have on your body, you tend to be very, very hot all the time. So, and I know this, I work with people that when you work in these places, and there's always kind of a thing over the thermostat, because the people who are lean, they tend to be a little bit colder, and the people who have more fat, more insulation on, they tend to be warmer. So you have to find this comfortable. If you work in a mixed crowd like that, you have to make sure you get a thermostat that will take care of both the obese and the lean employees. That's just a side note, but it is something that tends to happen a lot. The other thing that fatty acids are used for is to line the nerve cells. And this is important. Your nerve cells, especially in your brain, the white nerve cells, you have these little called myelin sheaths. It's a fatty sheath that goes around the nerves and helps protect the nerves. And these myelin sheaths are made out of fatty acids. So when you start decreasing your fatty acids, and you start decreasing your cholesterol because you're trying to eat the way the drug companies and food companies are telling you to eat, what you do is you decrease the fat in your body, you decrease the cholesterol in your body, or your body's ability to use it is actually what you've done. The fat accumulates, but you can't use it because of the things that we're going to be talking about. When you keep your insulin levels high, all you can do is store fat. You cannot burn it. You can't use it. So the only way you're going to use the fat out of your fat cells is to keep your insulin levels low. I won't go into that because I've talked about that in several of my past podcasts. But this is very, very important, because every single cell in your body uses fat as the membrane. The myelin sheaths, which goes around the nerve cells, uses fat. So and our cells are breaking down and building up all the time, constantly, every single second of every single day, whether you're sleeping or not, your body is constantly regenerating cells, and it needs these fatty acids in order to make all these cells, because that's what makes up the cell membrane. The other thing is your fat soluble vitamins. If you don't eat fat, you can't absorb your fat soluble vitamins. And your fat soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, ADEC. And this is very important, because since they've been telling everybody that they need to be decreasing their fat in their nutrition, which is a lie. Now what happened is we're starting to see a lot more people that are deficient in vitamins A, D, E, and K. And this is important. And we really saw this during COVID, when we had a lot of people coming in and they were dying, and we found out that they were extremely vitamin D deficient. So you have to have fat to get those. The other thing is fat cushions all your organs. So it cushions your body, it insulates your body, but it cushions your organs. So you have little fatty sheaths around your organs. And this is important. We need to be able to cushion our organs to keep them from damage. Although this can go too far, and we'll talk about that in the next podcast. The other thing that fat does is fat keeps you feeling full. It stays in your stomach for long periods of time. Fat and protein will stay in your stomach for 2 to 4 hours. And I've already talked about this in a past podcast also, to where when you eat carbohydrates, that only stays in your stomach for about 30 minutes. Okay. So obviously, if you eat carbohydrates, you're going to be eating you're hungry all the time. But not only does fat and protein stay in the stomach for longer, 2 to 4 hours versus like 30 minutes, but it also stays in the entire intestinal tract for a lot longer. Carbohydrates tend to stay in about another 30 minutes or so, and then it gets absorbed into your bloodstream, turned into fat, into triglycerides in the liver, and then stored. To where fat and protein stay in your intestines all the way through. They keep stimulating these different hormones that make you feel like you're full all the way through. So fat and protein will keep you feeling full for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, and carbohydrates will keep you feeling full for about a half hour. Okay. So you tend to eat a lot more, and we'll see what damage that causes next in the next episode when we talk about what happens when you eat too many carbohydrates and you get too many triglycerides being formed. Um, the other thing, when you eat that, so the food stays in your stomach for longer. So that makes you where you're not hungry all the time, stays in your intestines longer, so you're not hungry all the time. And then it also, when you eat fat and it goes around, it also you're actually giving your body the nutrients it needs. And that's another reason why your body gets hungry. When your body's hungry, it stimulates a hormone called ghrelin in your stomach that it makes you feel hungry. Okay. So when your stomach is growling, you're producing ghrelin. And ghrelin is one of the things that produces ghrelin is your body's needing nutrients. When you eat fat, when you eat meat, when you eat animal meat and animal fat, you're getting all the amino acids you need. You're getting all the essential fatty acids that you need. And we'll talk about those in a little bit. You're getting all the vitamins and all the minerals that you need. So your body feels nourished. So that's another reason why you don't get hungry when you eat that kind of food. When you're eating nothing but carbohydrates, you are not getting your cholesterol that you need. You're not getting the fatty acids that you need. These are vital to your health. You're also not getting all the amino acids that you need because we are animals. You'll get some amino acids because plants do have amino acids in their protein, but just not all the ones that animal needs. So you've got to eat animal protein to get all the amino acids that our body needs. So animal protein gives you fat, gives you cholesterol, so you get your essential amino acids, which means you have to eat them. Your body doesn't make it. You get your essential fatty acids, which means you have to eat them. Your body doesn't make it. You get all the vitamins and all the minerals that you need. When you eat nothing but plants, you do not get all the amino acids you need. You do not get the essential fatty acids that you need. And you only get a few vitamins and minerals. And you have to eat a lot and various types of fruit and vegetables even to get that amount in. So these are reasons why eating fat and protein actually keep you satisfied for much, much longer. You do not need a shot of a toxin to paralyze your intestinal tract to get you to lose weight. All you need to do is change the type of food you eat, quit eating the carbohydrates, and go into the, if you want to eat a few, eat God-made carbohydrates, eat real fruits, real vegetables, very, very little fruit, only eat seasonally when it normally would be growing. You don't eat strawberries in the middle of December. That's crazy. And as far as the plants, the real God-made carbohydrates that you eat, you want to stick to the ones that don't have a lot of starch. So stay away from the types of vegetables that grow underneath the ground. They're called tubers. So you've got that. So that's your potatoes, your white, your russet potatoes, your sweet potatoes, beets, carrots, all those grow underneath the ground, and they have a lot of basically glucose in them because that's the nutrients for the plant. But you don't need to be eating all that glucose because it's the massive amount of glucose that we're taking in that's causing all the diseases. And we've talked about that in a lot. It's not necessarily just high blood glucose. It's that glucose causes your insulin levels are high. It's high insulin levels that causes insulin resistance and putting inflammation in our body. Those are the two main things that are causing all of our problems. It just so happens that when you have insulin resistance, this is also when you start getting after a while, you start getting high blood glucose levels also. And so you've had a lot of damage before the doctor ever tells you you have high blood glucose because your insulin levels may have been high for the last 20, 30 years until you finally get so insulin resistant that now it can't control your glucose anymore and glucose levels go up. So our diseases are mainly caused from insulin resistance, which occurs over decades, and too much inflammation. But then because of that, that brings in high blood glucose, and all three of these together just sets it up for a horrible disease states in all of our body. So this is what we're trying to get people to understand. It is not fat and cholesterol, it's the overindulgence of carbohydrates that's causing all our disease states. So we're talking about fat. So we talk about how it lines all the nerve cells, it lines every single cell in our body. It helps us get our fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K absorbed, cushions our organs. It makes it where we're not hungry all the time. We feel satiated. It also by eating fat, that keep fat and protein, that actually keeps your insulin levels low, which is actually what you want, because when your insulin levels are low, you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes. You can reverse insulin resistance. The only thing you have to do is keep your insulin levels low. The only thing to make your insulin levels go high is eating glucose, okay, which means eating carbohydrates, which means eating animal-based plants. Now, protein will make your glucose go up a little bit. Make your insulin go up a little bit. And that is true, but nowhere near what carbohydrates do, and those nowhere near what the ultra processed carbohydrates do, like what you get when you eat man-made food. So that's one thing. It also, like I said, that's the energy balance, because when you keep your insulin levels low, you allow your body to eat the fat out of your fat cells and use that for an energy source, like we're supposed to. If you do eat carbohydrates, our insulin levels go up, which means now we're using glucose for our energy source, and we're turning into triglycerides, and we're storing in our fat cells until we don't eat anymore and our insulin levels come back down and we start using our fat cells again. So when you eat healthy, you actually have a nice balance of this energy balance. So you use your fat for the energy source for most of the time, and then the rest of the time for the fight or flight, you're going to use your glucose if you need it. The other thing is fat also generates heat. And I've talked about this in past podcasts, but you have white fat cells and you have brown fat cells. Brown fat cells are brown because they have a lot of mitochondria, which means they produce a lot more heat. They produce more heat than the cell actually uses. And so that heat goes out to the body. To our regular fat cells, they do produce heat, but they only produce enough just for their cells. Okay. So there's brown fat and there's white fat. So what you want is you want to turn some of this white fat into brown fat if you can, and that'll give you actually more energy. That'll increase your metabolism. The thing that makes white fat go to brown fat is low insulin levels. What makes brown fat turn into white fat is high insulin levels. So another reason why you want to keep your insulin levels low, so you can turn some of your white fat into brown fat, so you can use that for energy. And that helps generate heat. The other thing they found is this fat and cholesterol, when you have these LDLs, these actually have antibody effects also. These actually stimulate your immune system, so you can fight infections a lot better when you have higher LDLs. And like I said, also, with the fatty acids, there's a thing called essential fatty acids, which means your body does not make these. You have to get them from the outside. The two essential fatty acids are omega-6 and omega-3. Omega-6 fatty acids produce inflammatory prostaglandins. And we want inflammatory prostaglandins because if we get any of these toxins that we're absorbing through the nutrition that we're eating, if we're eating man-made food, or from and all the toxins that the glyphosate and all the things that they're spraying on our fruits and vegetables and everything, those are toxic to our body. So our body has to set up an immune response, an inflammatory response, to try to get rid of those. And that's what happens with the omega-6s. They produce these inflammatory prostaglandins. They help us get rid of those. However, when you eat way too many omega-6s, you're going to have lots of inflammation in your body. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. They make anti-inflammatory prostaglandins. So you really want to have a good balance of both of those. But when you eat man-made, ultra-processed food with all this flour and sugar and high fructose corn syrup, all this stuff they put in it, what ends up happening is you're also eating all these seed oils, these vegetable seed oils that are extremely toxic. The canola oil, safflower oil, peanut oil, soybean oil. All these are very toxic, very inflammatory to your body. And when you look at the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, you usually want omega-3, which is your anti-inflammatory, to omega-6, which is your inflammatory. You usually want about 1 to 3. Okay. So one anti-inflammatory to 3 inflammatory, or 4. And even up to 7 would be fine. And that's what you're going to get when you eat real animal meat, animal fat. That has, depending on the type of beef that you're eating, how they were fed, whether it's grass-fed, grass-finished, or grass-fed, grain-finished. But your ratio is going to be about 1 to 7, 1 omega-3 anti-inflammatory to 7 omega-6. But when you eat these seed oils and vegetable oils, that is totally different. That is almost all omega-6. So you may have like 1 to 50 omega-3 to 50 omega-6. So you're getting so much inflammation in your bodies, besides all the chemicals that they use to get these fats out of all these vegetable and seed oils. Those also put inflammation in your body. And again, remember, high inflammation in our bodies and high insulin levels lead to high glucose levels. And all three of those together is what's causing our cardiovascular disease, or causing all the diseases that we have. Basically, almost any disease you have is going to start with the basis of those three. So I want you to understand that fatty acids are extremely important to us. Now, where's it stored? Like we said, we have subcutaneous fat cells all over our body. And that's the way it's supposed to be, because we're supposed to be able to go for long periods of time. Like, think about when we were first created from God, there are going to be many days that we may go and we aren't going to have a lot of food. So you've got to have fat stores on board to be able to keep you through those times. Fat, we already said, you have fat stores all over your body, okay, for this reason. And fat produces more energy per gram than glucose. Glucose, if you look at our actual fat stores, the fat that we have, remember, fat, 1 pound of fat has a little over 4,000 calories, okay, 1,000 or 4,000 calories in 1 pound of fat. So if you're 100 pounds overweight, okay, that's a lot of calories that you have on board. And even if you're lean, a very lean person can still have over 100,000 calories worth of energy in their fat stores. And like me, so I weigh 165 pounds and I'm 12% body fat. So even at that, if I'm at 20%, 20 pounds, I mean, at 12% body fat and 165 pounds, that means I have about 20 pounds of fat on my body. Okay. At 4,000 calories per pound, that means that I've got 80,000 calories of stored energy on my body that I can access. Okay. So fat is so important. And because it's so little, that's why I said, you've got these fat stores all over your body. If you're using glucose, you're going to have twice that much to be able to do that. So fat is a great energy source. The other thing is, and this has really been seen in people like marathon runners, because if any of you know anything about marathon running, you'll be running these marathons. And what most people do, what a lot of marathoners do, is they do what's called carb loading. They've already taught their bodies over the last 30, 40 years that they're supposed to be using carbohydrates for their energy source, which we were never supposed to do. And because of that, and you only have about 10% of your liver as a glucose storage, and then 1% of each muscle, but you don't have very much store in that at all. Your glycogen stores, and that's what glycogen is, how you store glucose. You make like these little glucose bricks called glycogen, and that gets stored in your liver. You only have about 2,000 calories of energy stored in your glycogen stores, 2,000 calories, versus like what I said with me, I've got 80,000 calories just in fat stores on my body. So what these people do is, when you carb load, if you're going to be running a marathon and you use glucose for your energy source, you have to eat a ton of carbohydrates the night before. So you've got all this glucose rolling around. As you run, you start burning that glucose out of your system. You don't have very much stores, so you have to keep having more glucose the whole run. That's why you go over and you get these sugar drinks as you're running, so you replace those glucose stores, because it's unnatural. It's unnatural to use glucose for your energy stores, especially when you're working out like that. It is only natural to use fat. So you have to constantly replenish these. And if you know of anybody who's marathon runners, you know that they come to this thing where they feel like they hit a wall. It's called I hit a wall, or boink. Okay. What this is they're running so much, they've emptied all their glucose stores. They don't have enough glucose. They can't drink enough to keep them alive. And all of a sudden they just hit a wall. They have no energy left. If people can just go past that where they hit the wall, keep on running, and all of a sudden they feel like they get a second wind. What's actually happened is now their body switched over to say, okay, your glucose stores are empty. You don't have very much glucose in the blood anymore, so we need to start burning the fat. So your glucose levels go down, so your insulin levels go down, and that allows you to start burning fat out of your fat cells, and all of a sudden you get a second wind. Okay, that's if you're glucose. But there are also marathon runners who are fat burners, and these are the people, they don't carb load. they don't change their nutrition whatsoever. And when they run, they don't hit a wall. They have much more endurance because they've been burning their fat and using ketones for the entire race. And they have plenty of ketones on board, plenty of fat on board. So this is another thing that proves we were never supposed to use glucose for our energy source. And again, when you talk about glycogen stores only having 18 to 2,000 calories versus 100,000 calories that somebody who's lean can use, and way more than that if you actually are obese, using glucose for energy makes no sense whatsoever. And so these are the things that I wanted you to realize how important fat is. It's used for energy. It's used for cushion. It's used for all these things are essential fatty acids. So fat is actually not only good for us, it is vital to us. It's vital for all of our existence. And that is what I really want everybody to understand. So do not be afraid of cholesterol and fat. They do not cause these diseases. They do not cause diabetes. They do not cause obesity. That makes no sense. That is the way the fat and cholesterol is the way our body is made to use it. It's all these carbohydrates that we take in that our body doesn't know what to do with. So it puts a little bit in our storage, and then the rest of it turns it straight into triglycerides. Remember, that's where the fatty acid turns it straight into triglycerides into the liver. And then that gets circulated in our body and stored in our fat cells. And that's what our next podcast is going to be on, is what happens when we eat too many carbohydrates, like almost everybody is doing in the world today because of our dietary guidelines telling everybody that's what they should be doing. But again, the reason they're telling everybody that they should be eating carbohydrates and stay away from animal meat and animal fat is because all man-made food is made out of these ultra-processed carbohydrates. So this is a business deal. And they've hired people to make sure that you get addicted to sugar and flour. That's also a business deal. They are a company. They make lots and lots of money, trillions of dollars. That's fine. They're a business. That doesn't mean that you have to eat it. And I highly recommend that you don't. You stay away from them. Don't give your money to the food companies that are also going to get you more sick. So now you're giving your money to the drug companies. And now you're giving your money to the doctors and the hospitals. And you're also funding the big agricultural companies who give the wheat, corn, and soy to these food companies. You're also not going to be paying these big chemical companies who sell all the companies to the food companies so they can spray all these toxic chemicals all over our fruits and our vegetables. And you're also not going to be giving it to the big sugar industry who has convinced everybody that they need to put sugar in everything. And now they got people addicted. Keep your money out of the ultra processed foods, out of the drugs. Give your money to local farmers with real meat, real fruit, real vegetables. Your health will get better. You'll get better. And hopefully the food companies, drug companies will start losing lots and lots of money, and they'll change their ways. But for now, that's all I'm going to talk about, the fatty acids right now. And then the last one, which is going to be the fourth of this series of 4, we're going to talk about exactly what happens when you eat way too many carbohydrates all the time and what this does to your body, how it causes atherosclerosis, how it causes cardiovascular disease. So if you're interested in that, please tune in to the next one. And that's all I've got for right now. So as always, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. And always remember to make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life.